Okay, we'll start the lesson. We are doing Chinese Revolution. Chinese Revolution, this topic is divided into number one, what was China before modern era, before modern period? That is one. And second, how communists came to power, the struggle between nationalist versus communists. And third, Mao's China. Okay. So how was China before modern era? I find it is easy to understand China when you compare it with India. Okay. For example, how did modern India evolve? How did modern India come to be? What it finally came to be? It was like this. There were kingdoms, okay, at many places. Kingdoms. British came. Colonialism. And what they did was they unified. They unified it. They made it one India. Okay. And then they modernized. Educated the people in modern institutions. Okay. Elite emerged. Some industrialization also took place. Okay. And then freedom struggle. Freedom struggle with a very highly evolved ideology of Gandhism. Okay. And then they left. Only bad part of this was the violence related to partition. Lakhs of people died, and it was not a smooth transition. But probably if Hindus agreed, if SR would have been avoidable. So essentially, British did all these things. But in the case of China, nothing like this happened. It was not colonized by anyone, by any one country. Not unified. Not modernized. And who should lead post-colonial China? That is, who should lead? And the ideology by which new China should be formed was unclear. So you can see from this comparison with China, India was hugely benefited from the British rule. That is my point. We'll explore this in detail. This is the China in a pre-modern era. Okay. China was divided. It was not colonized by any one country, any one European country, but then many countries had occupied different regions of China or had control over the different regions of China. The British, take for example, this region. French is here, French. Japanese, this. Russian, something here. German, somewhere here. So these European powers had their sphere of influence or some kind of control over the regions, certain regions. So there was Chinese Empire, and then, but some areas under the influence of various countries. So in that way, China was partitioned. There was no one China under one colonial power. But then why do you say that is China? China consists of a civilization. There is some civilizational continuity. And how did these countries have come to have control? One example of this is what is called Opium Wars. Opium Wars took place between 1839 and 42. Opium Wars between British India and China. These wars took place over trade. British East India Company was taking tea, silks, and other goods, but paying in gold and silver. China was not importing anything from British India Company, whereas British India Company was taking these things. So China had to pay in gold and silver. And surely not enough gold and silver. So they started selling opium in exchange. And Chinese rulers did not want opium to be sold because it would lead to addiction, lead to many other problems. So they started controlling purchase of opium. And the British did not want. So as the emperor started taking more serious measures on import of opium, it led to war with the British. Those wars are called Opium Wars. And in those Opium Wars, China lost. And it lost certain territories. And it entered into some unequal treatment because it was an unequal agreement. It is an agreement between the loser and the winner. Okay. So often certain trade regulations and some control over the territory. And similarly, US, France, Germany also has similar treaties. So this is how China's past was different from India. And you can also see in this process, the emperor was getting weakened, or the empire getting weakened. So the traditional power of the empire was going down, but at the same time, not colonized by any one. And so that the power of that colonial power becomes the power of the China, like British power became India's power. Okay. So this was the position that China was subjected to till the 19th century. Okay. Now you can ask me questions. Unmute and ask.
Sir, so China was more homogeneous culturally and no different empires are infighting among the leaders then.
Okay. Not much. There was one weak ruler, that's all. Weak ruler, and it was a weak rule. I don't know if there were many other kingdoms, not like that. I'm not sure. The weak emperor, but after that, how many were there? I have no idea.
Okay, sir. Okay.
So what you mean to say is that in India we had a Mughal emperor and other kingdoms, right? Were there kingdoms like that? I don't think so. There was one weak emperor. That's what I understood. I don't know if it was accurate or not. Okay, next.
Sir, why British or others couldn't colonize? Because they had opposition.
Why they couldn't colonize is also an issue. Why they didn't try seriously the way they did it in India. That's true. That is also another issue. They were just settled in some port related, I mean, near the seashore or the closer to their empires. Probably it was too big, or I don't know why they didn't do what they did to India. That's true. Okay, next.
Actually, Chinese were good in science and tech. They had invented paper.
That is true, but that was long ago. European superiority came from Industrial Revolution, Democratic Revolution as well as Industrial Revolution. So China did not have. So these were ancient civilizations. In that sense, India also was an ancient civilization. It also had superior technology at one time, mathematics, astronomy, many things were there. But modern power, modern domination came from the Europe, and Europe went through Industrial Revolution and Enlightenment and Democratic Revolution. So modernization started Europe. So modern power concentrated in Europe, and institutions spread from colonialism onwards. So it doesn't really matter when you were powerful and if you were powerful long ago. No.
Sir, like if you compare,
Egypt also was a great civilization. Iraq was a civilization. China was a civilization. But in modern context, the progress started from Europe. Please continue.
Sir, I was just thinking, if we compare East and West, is there fundamental difference in their alignment towards innovation?
In their alignment towards?
Innovation, like their ability to innovate, think differently.
We don't know, but when we are talking about...
Sir, we lost your audio.
Am I audible now?
Yes, sir. Now.
Okay. See, when we are talking about the progress of the West, it was only in modern era, not before. So it is not a difference in terms of man. It is simply a particular time period. So the concentration of advancement varied depending on the time. At one time, Egyptian civilization, and at one time, Hindu civilization, here Chinese, and then Greek, and in recent years, Europe. So it was a shifting. In fact, there is one history law that is called the theory of retarding leads. That's called theory of retarding leads. Retarding leads says that the leader in one stage will not be a leader in the next stage, because the leader in one stage is less likely to change. So Europe was not the leader before. So it started everything afresh. So that is one thing. That is one observation. That is theory of retarding leads. So which region was progressing at what time changed over the progress of mankind. Okay, it is not that the man there was always in a way to not like that. For example, take America and India. India thinks about the past. America doesn't think about the past. There is nothing to think about the past. So they maxim, they talk about Lincoln and then George Washington. These are all very modern people. Okay, whereas India talks about Vedas. So because it talks about the old, it may not be in a position to think afresh about the new. It is like that. And now Islam is trapped in its past. So like that. So theory of retarding leads makes sense. So in modern era, the story started from Europe, and how it spread to other regions is the issue.
Right, sir.
Okay. It's not that they are different, not like that. Okay, any other question?
Were these powers, foreign powers, fighting with each other in China also?
There may be some battles, definitely. There may be some battles. I don't know the details, but this is the battle is going on all over the world. Battle among colonial powers. Okay. Anything else? Okay. Next, modernization. Okay. See, what is modernization? Modernization is about democracy. Okay. Industrialization and modern ideas. These ideas came from Europe. How did Europe spread its ideas to other countries? Trade, colonialism, education, Christianity. Okay, so new ideas entering the traditional societies and changing is modernization. Often modernization deals with equality, rationality. Okay. So when we see how these ideas are entering, then we can trace how modernization is spreading to that particular country. It often takes place through some people who are educated in modern schools. One such person is Sun Yat-sen. Sun Yat-sen, okay, born in 1866, born in a peasant family. He is called father of modern China. And he got Western education in Hawaii. He studied in a Christian school and influenced by Christianity. And influenced by Lincoln's idea of democracy, of people, by people, and for the people. And he wrote book, Three Principles of the People, for democracy and against monarchy. So Sun Yat-sen was one person who wanted to establish a democratic nation, democratic and modern Japan, modern China. And he felt there were serious problems with Confucian teachings and the traditions. So he wanted modern China and modern education. And he attempted a coup in 1895 and it failed. So he began writing, talking, mobilizing people, got support from exiles. And finally, one very important development took place in 1911. Qing monarchy was overthrown. Not by Sun Yat-sen, but by the military. He was not directly involved, but he was instrumental in this. He was not there in the country also at that time. Because people had respect for him, he was made protem president of what was called Republic of China, which was created in 1912. Okay. So what happened in 1911 was a very important development in the history of China. Okay. Because first time a republic was set up. Monarchy was overthrown. But that turned out to be short-lived because one military man, General Yuan Shakai, soon replaced him. This general, instead of respecting the parliamentary institutions and strengthening the creation of republic, he wanted to be like a king himself. Okay. And so soon sun was out. So there was no democracy. But this man died in 1960. After that, anarchy followed. Because there was a vacuum at the center. I think this shows that there were no other kings, because of which anarchy was created. And what was the nature of anarchy? There were warlords in different parts of China supported by foreign powers. They were fighting among themselves. Okay. So it was a chaotic situation after 1916. Then what happened? Sun Yat-sen wanted to end this hierarchy, sorry, anarchy. And how could this anarchy be ended? So for that, he himself need to have an army, because it is a fight among the warlords. He had to defeat the warlords. And he had set up an institution where military training was given, and some professional soldiers also joined, and many others joined. And in this process, Sun Yat also founded what was called Kuomintang, also Nationalist Party. This is called Nationalist Party. And second important person in this Nationalist Party and his Sun Yat-sen's commandant was Chiang Kai-shek. Okay, he is the second important person. Chiang Kai-shek. So it is he who played an important role in defeating the warlords and finally created one unified center by 1926. Okay. But Sun Yat-sen died by 1925. So he didn't see the unification. Okay. So in this context, what was his party? And then what was some other party which would finally come to power? That was communists. Communists. If you go by the dates, 1925 was the year of death of Sun Yat-sen. And you know, Russian Revolution took place in 1917. So Marxist ideas and Russian Revolution was also inspiration to some people in China. They set up Communist Party of China in 1921. 1921. Okay. Sun Yat-sen had liking for the communists. He found communists are more dynamic, more energetic, okay, and more people-centered. So he wanted the communists to join the Nationalist Party. And Sun Yat-sen thinking also somewhat closer to communist thinking, in the sense that he believed in strong state. Strong state. He said a nation should have an unlimited freedom, but an individual should have a limited freedom. So that is in strong state. Centralization. And also interested in the welfare of workers and peasants. So there was a similarity between Sun Yat-sen and the communists, because of which he wanted communists to be a part of the Nationalist Party. And Sun Yat-sen was happy with some of the changes that the communists brought in the Nationalist Party. But this attitude of Sun Yat-sen towards the communists many communists did not like. So they wanted Nationalist Party to have nothing to do with the communists. Their fear was that if the communists were allowed, communists would take over the Nationalist Party. And nationalists preferred American cooperation, whereas the communists preferred Russian cooperation. And nationalist party's main base was middle classes and landlords, whereas the communists were more favorable to peasants and the workers and the lower classes. So many nationalists could see that the communists were their real enemies. But Sun Yat-sen did not think so. So as long as he was there, communists were closely associated with nationalists. And in fact, communists played a role in the unification. But once Chiang Kai-shek got the power, so he was the head of the Kuomintang government from 1928. And communists cooperated with him. But Chiang felt that the communists were the main rivals to him. And so he went after them and purged tens of thousands of communists in 1927. Okay. Chiang Kai-shek was interested in modernizing China, modern education, transport, industrialization. And he was favorably disposed towards taking American help. So, if not for communists, China would have taken a different path. But how communists came to power and how these relations changed, we need to see. Okay. Now tell me, what questions do you have?
Sir, I draw some parallel between India and China. India had a national party, and there was a rise of extremism.
India was a
India had a nationalist party, Congress.
Congress, yes.
And then there was a rise of extremism. And then there were
what are you calling as extremism? You mean terrorism?
No, like
Tilak. Tilak was in Congress only. You can't say he was an opposition to Congress.
No, that Sura split happened, and then
that was simply a small split between moderates and extremists.
Okay.
So how can you draw parallels? Sunil, what do you say? Compare India and China. KS, what do you say about India and China comparison? Is there any comparison here? What do you think is the main difference here between India and what happened in China? Don't you think it is militarily coming to power?
Yes, sir. Yes. Use of power.
Military coming to power, and Chinese versus Chinese, this one. Of course, foreigners may have played an indirect role supporting warlords. Whereas in India, highly modernized movement, ideological, modernized, and peaceful, and not through military means.
Right.
Don't you think these are all assets of India? It's not general taking over. Isn't it so?
Yes, sir. our political struggle we can feel proud of.
The
compared to
entire
China. Actually,
political
we can-
struggle was
we should-
modern. Non-violence as an ideology, and then mobilization, peaceful, something very privileged. Least amount of violence in this. Of course, this was by 1920s. Okay. We need to compare what happens by 1940s. By 1950, where we are. Where is India and where was India and where was China? By 1945, 1947. But this was by 1920s.
So what was the reason?
And then, but there are still spheres of influence of different countries. They were all there. He only defeated some warlords. Okay. So,
Sir, why did Chiang Kai-shek suddenly started killing people, the communist?
okay, because he always felt that threat to his power would come from the communists. He always knew that they were very dangerous people. I mean, maybe class bias or whatever. There are differently to, for example, they would agree on unification, they would agree on nationalism, they would agree on modernization, but what would be the kind of ideology later? What kind of China they should have? There are differences. So Chiang felt that these people were dangerous people. You don't think so?
Sir, were the number
Don't you think
equal?
these two? Don't you think these two are two different streams altogether? Even now, the differences are not resolved.
Yeah, it is totally opposite. Sir,
Ah,
were the
exactly.
numbers on communist side or the other side, Chiang Kai-shek side?
Chiang side only. Numbers and everything would change. How communists would come to power, we will discuss. Finally, how they managed to come to power by 49. So basically, around 30s, communists were a small force, and there was a nationalist government at the center. But communists were a threat. That was the position. So if communists were not there, China would have gone in one direction. But they were there. They are not going to keep quiet. And don't you see that in India, there was really no ideological challenge to Gandhi's leadership or Congress? There was nobody close to challenging Congress, wasn't it so? Because at one time there were terrorists, but terrorists themselves were convinced that their ideology was not right. And there were communists, and communists felt that they should not do anything to undermine Gandhi's leadership. They should only impact the working of the Congress rather than undermine Gandhi. That was their impression. So in that sense, Gandhian leadership was unchallenged. But China was not like that. It is a fight. It was a fight. So do you see, basically, in the case of India, you get the Britishers out. Here, there are many foreign powers and the emperor. Okay, you get out. But the difference is the people have a different notion of what should be a modern nation, what should be modern India, and what should be modern China. So when we are establishing a new order, what are the elements of that new order? So that would be debated. So people have strong convictions on what kind of a new nation that they were going to found. So definitely communists had one ideology because there was a Russian Revolution by that time, Marxism, Leninism. Okay, so that was a powerful idea. And opposed to that, there were other ideas. And Russian Revolution was rejected, condemned, or disapproved by so many people from democratic countries. Because it was a completely unusual, unique revolution. Nobody did that before. Because before that, only English Revolution and American Revolution took place. That's all. So Russian Revolution was different. It was a completely different set of principles. So should China go along Russian lines? Was an issue. Nationalists were sure that these people were dangerous. So debate like that did not happen in India. Differences between moderates and extremists is too small. And terrorists, their methods were not effective. More importantly, they didn't know what to do after they got independence. They didn't say anything clearly. There was no ideology. Okay. So Russian Revolution provided a template of what kind of a political system a country should have. So Lenin provided that template. Okay. So do you follow that? The issue was really significant. Whereas in India, we didn't face these debates. The differences were very minor. Moderates and extremists is no debate at all. It's a small issue. Terrorists, no way. And communists were not really trying for an alternative society. So where was the debate and conflict? No. And military was not needed. Nothing like having soldiers. Maybe if you need soldiers to unseat the power, Gandhi would not have been a leader. Somebody else would have been a leader. Gandhi would have fought under certain circumstances, but that would not have been a talented fight. He wouldn't have been a leader. Maybe he would have been a soldier, small soldier in an army. Anyway, he did take part in war. But in auxiliary services, not the main war.
Sir, sir, I'm trying to link communism and Hindu culture. So like the communism did not grow significantly in India. So, I mean, is it because that like there is a more tolerance in Hinduism that suppressed the communism?
But how can we say that the Chinese are intolerant and they wanted communism? We will look into that.
Yes, sir. That was a question.
We have seen in Russia, it is not because people wanted it. We'll see how communism came in China. We will look into that.
Yes,
sure.
Sir. At a broader level, I just wanted to ask, is Hinduism is more tolerant than other culture?
We will look into that. Tolerant of what? We'll look into that.
Fine.
I don't think there is anything in Chinese that should lead to communism. No. We will look into that. Okay, now next. Communists versus nationalists. Okay.
Sir, I have a doubt.
Deepika, please.
Yes, sir. What is the object?
Deepika, I'm coming to your general studies preparation. Do you understand that people should debate like this and discuss like this?
Yes, sir.
Not simply memorize 1926, 1927, like.
Sir, it is difficult to memorize without.
Exactly. Understand. And more importantly, you can see modern world is a foundation for many GS areas. Tell me in which area modern world is not important? It's about polity, economy, society, history, international relations. Unfortunate part of modern world is that not many questions are coming, but very useful for understanding texts. In fact, I was very happy when they introduced, and I taught for two years after the introduction. But then as they were not asking more questions, I dropped. Because basically students may find this indirectly useful, but they want to know immediately how many marks. So in fact, that is a problem with entire GS coaching. Whatever you do, we don't know how many questions will come. But in the case of optional or ethics and essay, sure. GS preparation is difficult. Okay. So Deepika, are you following?
Yes, sir. Sir, this Nationalist Party of China, what was the objective of this party? Why is it called Nationalist Party?
It was called nationalist because it was named so. Nothing more than that. Nothing more than that. Communist Party was called communist for some reason. Nationalist it was just named so. Everybody was a nationalist. Okay. It was an early, for example, in India also we called it Indian National Congress. Okay. So, but of course, you are asking nationalism in particular, nationalism was an emerging ideology around that time. So somebody is saying nationalist.
For India, we had the Britishers ruling. But in the case of
Okay, thank you. That's a good question then. In China, they felt so many foreign devils were ruling China. And there was no unity. And so there should be a Chinese nation. Okay. Anti-imperialism and anti-foreign element is common to both communists and nationalists. Of course, communists have an international agenda and nationalists don't have. But freeing China from foreign domination is a common goal of parties as well as the people. Okay, all this was called a century of humiliation by the Chinese. Humiliation, this is the part of humiliation, and the humiliation would continue. They would say till 1949.
Sir, if China had been colonized, would communism be?
Would not have come. If China was colonized and then peacefully power handed over like in British, then communism would not have come. I mean, less likely. Under certain circumstances it came, but it would have been difficult. We don't know.
So same would have been the case with India if it had been colonized. There is a
colonized, modernized, and peacefully power handed over, then communism would be very difficult.
Okay.
I don't think difference is in Chinese civilization versus Indian civilization. It is simply colonial experience was different. That's how I see it. Indian colonialism was different from the colonial experience of China. Otherwise, India was not familiar with English. India had its own civilization. We will see, but I don't think there is anything peculiar in China that should be communist. Not like that. We will see. Okay. But I see predominantly the colonial experience is different. Remember, if you look at communism, it is not that some people are convinced of communism and when things are favorable, they are bringing communism. Not like that. There was instability, people seeking change. There was an opportunity. Okay. And then somebody puts everything under communist framework. It is like that. Not when everything is fine, nation becomes communist. It never happened like that. That is why we can understand the present day Maoists or Maoists anywhere. can never come to power simply out of nowhere when things are stable and fine. It's impossible to fight a standing army. So only under certain unstable conditions, civil unrest and weak center, people wanted change. And then somebody uses that as an opportunity and imposes his brand of communism. It's like that only. That's what happened in Russia and will happen in China also. Okay. Next we'll go to Naveen, you want to ask something?
No, sir, minor thing I can ask later.
Sure. Okay, now communists versus nationalists. Okay. So communists were purged and state versus communists now. Okay. And don't equate communists with Mao. There were many others. Mao emerged as a undisputed leader much later. Okay, in 1930s. Okay. What normally is the emphasis of the communists? Communists traditionally focused on workers, industrial workers. Okay. And in the beginning, communism meant Leninism. Lenin believed that industrial workers had to bring communism because that was what Marx also wrote. But in the context of China, Mao emerged as a leader because Mao seemed to have applied Marxism to Chinese conditions. Mao identified that in China, peasants play a very important role. So any revolution cannot come from industrial workers, but it should come from peasants. And Mao was also good at guerrilla warfare. Okay. So Mao would define Marxism, of course, with the help of Leninism, to peculiar Chinese conditions. And also Mao is nationalist. He would promote strong Chinese nationalism. Okay. Okay. What kind of fight he had with the nationalists? One important development in the growth of communism was this called Long March of 1934. We discussed that communists were there at many places and they were being harassed and intimidated by the nationalists. And to protect themselves, communists wanted to take shelter in a faraway place, and they were driven out from rural households. They were driven out from rural households. Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, sir. You are audible.
Okay. And covering 6,000 miles a year. And they moved to this place near Mongolian border. And there they managed to barricade themselves. And out of 1 lakh started, only 10,000 survived. Okay. And Mao became an undisputed leader during this march of 1934. People have discussed why they had to be on a run like this. And they found that some strategies were changed as per the advice of one Soviet military man, Soviet advisor, and to the dislike of Mao, and communist cadre supported Mao's strategies were right. And so that Soviet advisor was done away with, and Mao became the leader. And another important person was Zhou Enlai. He was also an important leader. So it was by 1934 Mao became an undisputed leader. And there, around this time, Mao also evolved his ideology of communism with Chinese characteristics, peasantry based. So that's what Mao was. So this was the position of nationalists versus communists. And the one event that affected this power balance was Japan's invasion. Okay, the role of Japan. Japan occupied Manchuria in 1931. And there was no resistance. Manchuria was northeast of China. So there was no war in 1931 because army commander there simply accepted Chinese occupation. And they tried a similar thing in 1937. But this time, Chinese resisted. And a lot of fighting followed, and 2 cities of Beijing and Nanjing fell, and much of coastal China came under Japan's control. It is this time rape of Nanjing took place. And 1937 is regarded as beginning of World War II in Asia. Okay. And by this time, both the parties united. Why did they get united? There was a fight, but Chinese invasion brought them together. Okay. But if they were together, then why did they fight once again? Because their calculations were different. Both of them were thinking in terms of what would happen after Japan was defeated. Okay. And also the way communists and nationalists fought against Chinese, so against Japanese, was vastly different. Chiang government moved west in 1938. And he was not actively fighting the Japanese. Okay. Whereas communists were giving tough fight. When Japan occupied some areas, nationalist government moved away, and many people moved along with the nationalist government, and some people moved towards the areas where the communists occupied, area of Henan. And at Henan, military training as well as ideological training was given. And many volunteers came to this area. Okay. And so more people joined the communists And during war years, Mao's army grew to 1 million. So what Japanese occupation did was it raised nationalism, and communists were better at it, and many people joined. Okay, and Communist Party became so popular that it set up organizations in every village for women, youth, and exclusively for educators. Okay, and whereas nationalists were unpopular in the areas they were there and ineffective against the Japanese, and the conscripts that they got were not motivated enough. Okay, because essentially Chiang thought that Japan would leave one day, but communists were the main threat. He told a journalist that the Japan was a disease of the skin, whereas communism was a disease of the heart. So that were the priorities of Chiang government, nationalist government. America was aiding nationalist government, giving money, giving weaponry, but the government was not giving its best in its fight against the Japanese. It was reserving its best to fight against the communists. Okay, so this unequal fight that the communists and the nationalists gave against the Japanese brought so much of difference in the levels of the popularity. More and more people went to the communists. Okay, and so when war ended by 1945, war ended because Japan was bombed and they were defeated. By the end of World War II, communists were more popular, more powerful, and they were there in more areas. And then the Civil War started during 1946 to 1949. Americans tried to mediate between the two. And one interesting thing here is, it is not that Americans simply resigned that China would one day be on the side of Russia. Americans were in touch with Mao, and they didn't want to lose China to Russia, but they never took a stand in favor of the communists and against the nationalists, though there were some American diplomats who favored that position. But in the end, between the communists and the nationalists, they chose nationalists, though nationalists were not fighting well, they were unpopular, they were corrupt. In the end, America found itself on the side of the nationalists, and China in that way was lost to Russia. Okay. So, and big cities fell into communist hands in 1948. And by October 1949, communists were all over China. And the nationalists, with their supporters and with some assets, fled to Taiwan. And there they said that one day they would get back to mainland China. And we know they never got back. So that was the story. Now tell me. So what do you think are the differences between that?
Sir, I want to compare between Russia and China.
Exactly. That is an interesting comparison. Yes.
Both want to start communism through feudalism, at least feudalism. as a mode of production.
Both want to?
Start communism through feudalism.
No, through abolition of feudalism.
Through abolition of feudalism.
Yes. Both were interested in abolishing feudalism. That's true.
Okay, that means that is against the Marx proposal.
No, feudalism was not supposed to be there, but feudalism was to naturally was to die because of industrialization, according to Marxism. But Lenin did not believe in its natural death, and Mao also did not believe in its natural death. So both Lenin and Mao thought they were fast forwarding Marx timeline.
Sir, in China, what I have learned is Marx tried to apply the Weberian framework of superstructure imposing the base rather than base imposing base affecting the superstructure.
That's fine. Through ideas, they want to change. Lenin wanted to change through ideas, and Mao also wanted to change through ideas. That's true.
But here Mao is more adamant regarding cultural revolution, where he.
We will look into that. We'll just discuss till this part.
Okay, sir.
So basically, it is anti-colonialism and anti-Japanese sentiment and successful fight against the Japanese that brought the communists to power. So do you follow, Naveen?
Yes, sir.
Case, any questions?
Sir, a similar experiment done by Subhash Chandra Bose. He also tried to raise an army. But
that's
yeah, different context.
But it was an extremely small, because when Japan was going to invade. But this was on a much different scale altogether. I mean, what I thought your question was comparing Mao with Russian leaders. Mao, you see, Mao didn't get power the way Lenin got.
It was kind of instant.
Lenin used the opportunity in a vacant place, but Mao was real struggle. Mao faced so much problems. Mao was man behind this struggle. It was not like Lenin. Okay, Mao worked. That's why Mao meant so much. It was not like in a weak place you go and then occupy one palace and then say you are a communist. Mao was not like that. Mao worked hard, suffered so much, so many things he did. Okay, so it was much more than what Lenin did in Russia. Okay. Nor Stalin did, because to Stalin somebody gave power. Mao had to get it himself. Okay. So in that sense, Mao had to put in more work. Okay, next, Mao's China. Okay, now we'll see what actually happened and what is this communism. Okay, is it clear? Deepika, you have any questions till this point?
No, sir.
Okay. Now we understand what actually is communism. Okay. Mao was only making, I would say, minor change to Leninism. Leninism, minor modification is regarding peasantry. But everything else was Leninism only. So what did Leninism mean? Number one, land reforms. Lenin promised land and land reforms took place. Here land reforms meant from landlords to landless. That is one. And next, collectivization. Peasants' land being taken away and give to the party. Okay. And then industrialization. Fast industrialization. And then one party, no free media, dictatorship, party dictatorship. No legislature, executive, judiciary, separation of powers. Okay. So, Mao believed in all these elements. So, he wanted to set up one party state in which he was undoubtedly. These are the things he believed in. But let us discuss what would be the problems. Land reforms. What kind of problems that land reforms would get into? See, if there is a systematic survey and clear sealing and clear identification of the landlord and how much to be taken and how much landlord will be allowed, and that too done legally and peacefully, that would be good. But that is not the way it happened. Not the way it happened in Russia, not the way it happened in China. Communist Party cadres go to a village and declare somebody. Okay, and then are very violent. And then it is not only those who have the land, but their supporters who are not supportive to the cause, to the communist cause. All of them will be branded as class enemies and tortured or killed. So much of violence would be involved in this. And do you know that violence divides the village? Do you know what happened in the case of Mao? Mao first talked about land reforms in the beginning, but that was popular, but very soon it was leading to divisions. For example, party cadre may be a son of a landlord. Do you know, it is not really the poor who are politically conscious, but middle classes, and the middle classes may have come from the landlord's family. Okay, why Mao himself was from reasonably rich father, I mean, though peasant. And so that creates class conflict within a village. And Mao understood this itself can be a barrier to mobilization. And you know, he stopped this. He had it in the beginning, but then after that he didn't continue. And then he didn't have it during the struggle against the Japanese and during the Civil War times. So he didn't continue this land reform agenda. He saw there was a problem with land reforms. So that was an issue with land reforms. Next, but we can say people may support land, at least more number of people support land reforms if done properly. No, my point is that people may support the idea of land reforms, though they may not approve of the methods. Okay, methods be logical, rational, legal, and peaceful. But that is not the way it happened. That is one. Next, collectivization. Collectivization, I don't think there is any support to collectivization from the people. What did collectivization mean? You take the land from everybody, rich and poor. First you take from the rich, you call it class war, and then you take from everybody and give it to the party. Do you know, it means you are taking the land from everybody. So do you know, people think that the communism meant giving land to the poor, but actually communism meant taking land from the poor. So sometimes in China, communes were organized, and communes were the size of 25,000 people. 25,000 people would work according to a party discipline, when to come, what to do, okay, and then this is the work. And the grain or the production, they may not enjoy, they will get only some. And if there is a scarcity and if the towns need more, they will take, the party will decide. And anybody not contributing will be punished. And when there is a scarcity, then there would be rationing. And if you think under communism, weak people also would be supported even if they don't work, that is not true. In fact, Lenin said that who is not contributing cannot eat. So disabled or sick, eliminated. And food was used as a punishment. Sometimes villages are punished, people are punished. And under certain circumstances, people started stealing food, and for stealing grains, people are punished. And if anybody is found cooking, because one is not supposed to cook, everything has to be cooked in communal kitchen only. If anybody sees any fire somewhere, and then they may be punished. So the whole population was reduced to serfdom. Tell me, how can this be communism? Marx said that communism should be end of alienation of man. But how would this end alienation? It would, in fact, man is made an animal. It is domestication of man. And a lot of violence took place during land reform stage and during the collectivization stage. Okay. And so next, let me go. Industrialization. Fast industrialization. Why industrialization was important? Because they felt that the security of communism would lie in producing more of industrial proletariat, which meant more industrialization. Okay, and hasty industrialization, and also wages were low, workers' rights were not respected, there was no right to strike. People from the upper classes were targeted in an industrial setup. Okay, I will just come to. Okay, just ask me question. Not the topic is not completed. We'll get back to this. Okay. So tell me, let us ask ideologically. Do you understand these issues?
Yes, sir. Sir, there is a contradiction in the Marx theory. He wants freedom to people, at the same time he wants the violence to happen.
But you cannot say Marx wanted violence to happen.
No, but revolution, he proposed revolution.
But he didn't say about violence as such. He talked about dictatorship of the proletariat, and but where was the violence? Because
but he was clear of class revolution.
There was supposed to be very few industrialists by the time these people would rebel. So we can't say he proposed violence. I think it was Lenin who did this violence, and Mao was much more ruthless. Just let us discuss these land-related issues.
Okay.
Was it fair or unfair?
Unfair.
Very much. So where is communism here? And do you understand? People think that communism is getting the land, but tragically, it is even the poor losing the land. That's what happened.
Yes, sir. Basic meaning of communism is stateless, classless society. So it is completely contrary to the Marx.
So basically, this is a division of Communist Party versus the rest of the society, isn't it? Everybody becomes a laborer here. Nobody is the owner. In fact, Marx wanted everybody to be owner, but communism meant everybody to be a serf. So where is Marxism here? And the same question can be put to Lenin also, because Lenin did the same thing. So where is Marx here? I don't understand.
Sir, if everybody is a laborer means no classes, everybody is equal.
But Marx wanted equality in the sense of dignity, because the purpose of all this is to end alienation. Not everybody is made an animal. Loss of freedom, isn't it?
Yes.
Moreover, not everybody is made as an animal. That is also true. But then there is a communist party, the party of the privileged. And even that, the people who are close to the supreme leader have the privilege. And if you disagree, then you lose. And many times it is the opponents who are killed, declared as class enemies.
Yes.
That is the issue.
Sir, sir, this reform method can also identify who are anti-ideological to the party and also thereby eliminate them.
That is true. That is what I mean. It need not be anti-ideology. It can be anti-person, personal opponents. I mean, opponents, personal enemies also can be, scores can be settled against personal enemies. So for example, if you go to a village, in a village, if you don't like a person, you have some position in a communist party, then you say that fellow, this fellow, that fellow. If you have an idea of what kind of things the Maoists in India did, random punishments, calling somebody class enemy, eliminate, settling scores. Okay, because there is no proper process in this. So people would be shouted at, branded, and killed and tortured. It is like that. So even if land distribution is acceptable, that is not the way to do. And land collectivization, I would say, is deception, because nobody took communism to do that. Even in the case of Lenin, when Lenin promised land, people thought they would get the land. But what Lenin did was to take the land. So what is communism then? Isn't it so? If you understand the land issue, you understand how deceptive this communism is. Naveen.
Sir, I mean, from your arguments, it looks like it's not a communism at all.
Of course it is not.
Yeah, but why we are calling them as communist party then?
We should not. That is we are calling it communist because they called it communist. We don't have to think that is what real communism is. That is what Marx said. No. We don't have to equate communism as a good word if that is communism. No. Where is Marxism here in this? So Lenin destroyed it, and this man makes it much worse. And do you see, he understood that land distribution itself is a sensitive issue and there would be opposition. So now and then he talks about land distribution, because if it's little more, then party will be divided. In fact, these are the issues Gandhi also faced in freedom struggle. Gandhi said all land distribution issues, land rights can be fought when landlords are the British, but when landlords are Indians, no, don't fight. So it was very violent exercise, and land and collectivization is converting people into serfs. That doesn't make sense. I don't see any communism here. Okay, now let us do some years and what it means. We'll get back to this.
So I think Marx became famous for these bad experiments instead of his original idea.
That is true. You are right. Okay. Two things. These are the years. Between 1949 and 52, 90% of the Chinese were peasants. I mean, around that at that time, land from the landlords was taken away. Millions were imprisoned or killed during these years. So land redistribution meant death. And next, collectivization took place between 55 and 57. Okay. At some places, 25,000 size communes were created. Later, the size was reduced. Tools and cattle also were collectivized. And when production was low, grains confiscated. Okay, fine. And do you know, at one time, and you see how power is so centralized and how it can be responsible. When the grain production was low, Mao got an idea that the sparrows were eating, and so sparrows were ordered to be killed. And people started killing sparrows. Okay, they would make so much of noise, and finally so that the sparrows won't rest anywhere, and they would get exhausted and fall down, and people would kill. Like that, many sparrows were killed and successfully killed. And because there were no, after the killing of sparrows, locusts attacked, locusts, insects, all that. So Mao gave a call without any understanding of how the cycle, ecological cycle works. But of course, a politician need not understand. But then how couldn't others warn? It was because of centralization. And finally, it led to famines. And you know, many pathetic cases of being reported during famines. It seems there were some cases of eating white porcelain-colored mud. Okay. Because recently, this man made an extensive study, Frank Dikotter, so professor of humanities at the University of Hong Kong. He wrote these 3 books: Mao's Great Famine, covering 58 to 62, and then this book, Tragedy of Liberation, 45 to 57. This is the second book, and then Cultural Revolution. So archives were opened, and he did a lot of work on archives. And he says during the famine, according to him, famine related, 45 millions died. All kinds of actions related to land related issues. And all the things put together, there is a Black Book of Communism which says that the total death, including other experiments, are 65 million. And 65 million, you know, is the total more than the total casualties of World War I and World War II. World War I 10 plus and World War II 50 plus millions. So that was land related violence, but that was not the only violence. In 1958, Mao started a great leap forward, introducing mass industrialization. So communes are supposed to produce steel. He called for what was called backyard steel making. Okay. Inexperienced people did so many things without any proper training. It turned out to be a costly failure, and instead of great leap forward, it led to depression. I mean, economy came to depression. And when these so many failures took place, instead of Mao accepting his role in the failure, he called for what was called Great Proletarian Cultural Revolution in 1965. And the author gives an insightful account of the author Dikotter gives an insightful account of why this cultural revolution. Lenin and Stalin only wanted to change the class composition. Okay, they may have declared classes as enemies, but Mao thought the culture itself was the enemy, and only when culture itself was changed, communism would be successful. So he was for proletarian cultural revolution. And in this, tradition was attacked, intellectuals were attacked, doctors are asked to scrub hospital floors, and some killed. Professors wear dunce caps, walk on floors, bark like dogs, and many sent to the villages. Okay. It was what was called Red Guards, mainly consisting of students, was created. They were asked to make war on the older generation. So the students would memorize what was called as Red Little Book with the title Thought of Chairman Mao, and then they would shout slogans, criticize people, and in that process, many of Mao's opponents were eliminated. Many party people were eliminated. Okay, and finally, so much of chaos was created. Universities were closed, schools were closed, and became anarchy. Army had to intervene in 1969. And meanwhile, art, music, books, all destroyed. It was all chaos. So Mao thought the culture had to be changed. Okay. So he never had the habit of criticizing, accepting the criticism. In fact, and one important thing about 1965 was that Stalin died in 1953, and later Khrushchev came to power. Khrushchev denounced Stalin, and many of the atrocities done towards Stalin's era came to be known. And Mao did not want to meet the same fate, and also he wanted to do something which Stalin could not, and which Lenin also could not. So he wanted to have a great place in history. So he wanted to change the culture to be more tuned to the communism without ever thinking where he was wrong. In fact, soon after Khrushchev's announcement, Mao asked intellectuals and others to criticize what was going on in China. He said, let 1,000 flowers bloom. And many criticized, and all those who criticized were promptly punished. So that was Mao's handling of dealing with criticism. And you know, his number 2, in 1967, that was after Cultural Revolution, this Liu Shaoqui was second in command. Okay, he was beaten, regularly beaten by the during the Cultural Revolution and called renegade, traitor, and scam, and finally imprisoned, died in prison. This happened to number 2. It was much later, Deng rehabilitates him, but then he says somebody else, that is Lin Biao, defense minister, is blamed for giving false evidence against the number 2. Okay. But by 70s. Okay, by 1980s, Cultural Revolution was condemned as a mistake and his portrait silently removed. But by from 71 onwards, people understood very clearly. I mean, why not Cultural Revolution? Even before, many people understood that Maoism was such a failure. And by 1970s, many were involved in informal market, bribing bureaucracy. So Dikotter says that it was not really Deng who brought market reforms, but it is the people who brought market reforms in China, and Deng only followed those reforms. So Maoism was a colossal failure in a normal country. That man would be prosecuted for his crimes against humanity. But why is he not being prosecuted and why he is still having some statues in China? It is because the same Communist Party is ruling. They were not in a position to completely denounce and move ahead because their own legitimacy would be questioned. And if they really open up, many things would come out and the party won't like those things to come out. So it was a disaster of epic proportions, which nobody should follow. Now tell me.
Sir, is it bound to fail sometime?
It is bound to fail. That's true. What else can happen?
It is still continuing.
It is continuing, but we don't know how far they are continuing because of successful economy. They want to deliver growth, they want to deliver wealth, but politically they don't want to give any freedom. But we don't know when things may collapse. But that is the situation. But when it will collapse or whether it will collapse is one issue. But do you understand this Maoism?
Yes, sir. Sir, did Marx ever talk about planned reforms?
No. To Marx, distribution is a part of ending alienation. Distribution is not the end. In fact, he talks about what he called crude communism, where people are equal, but that doesn't mean anything. It means the situation is worse. So he says, for example, in a family, if you make instead of wife and instead of husband and wife, if you destroy family and if you make woman as common property, he says that becomes prostitution and not communism. So Marx is not blindly eliminating private property. He wants, his aim is ending of alienation. So reducing or ending inequalities is a part of that ending human alienation. It is not forcible abolition of private property. Okay, this is a lot of violence. How can this much of violence be a part of communism? What do you say, Karim? Yes.
Sir, can you please repeat the question, sir? The last one.
How can this much of violence be a part of communism? Isn't it so?
Yes, sir. One common man should feel the freedom, dignity, and
Freedom and dignity. Yes.
should not be living in fear under
Exactly.
communism, because he should feel like the whole state is for his protection.
Exactly. So every man felt persecuted. If number two can be beaten publicly and just because of he opposed Mao, where is the freedom to anybody? Isn't it? So it was definitely a meaningless political system. So don't you think India was spared of such experiments? Anant, did you follow the class?
Sir, in a way, India also experimenting, sir.
Okay, but not such a disastrous experiment.
Sir? Yes, that is what.
Such a disastrous experiment, right?
Sir?
Hmm.
Am I audible, sir?
Hmm.
Sir, in the Hitler and Mussolini class, you said that there are 4 points in the sense. The first thing is we are new. We have a destiny to fulfill. Our past is great, and we can recreate and regain the glory if we act on it.
Okay.
Does this apply to China too under Mao? Did people admire Mao in such a way that he will solve their problems?
Okay. Why is, if there is some respect left for Mao, why is it so? He is seen as somebody who unified China and brought it free from foreign control. So he is seen as somebody who unified China and freed from foreign control. But then, if not Mao, unification would have taken place and everybody got freedom. Why should we attribute only to Mao? That's what I think. More importantly, I mean, first you should allow freedom. Once you allow people to talk, really criticize, and I think Mao might come out as bad as Hitler or Stalin, not like what he is today. Hitler's regime gone and Stalin's regime gone. That is why they became villains. But Mao's regime is not gone. That is why there is some confusion and worship about Mao. That's how I see it. If China come to be democratic, I think Mao will be the villain. Why did he create this mess? Because there were clear alternatives. The path was wrong and the violence was wrong. And even if he chose a particular path, seeing the violence, he should have changed his ways. He didn't change. So extremely intolerant. And he killed people who were very close to him just because they were critical of him. Very, very unfair. Where is humanity in him if he is like that? So he's not a good human being to begin with. Just like Stalin and Hitler, nothing different. You can't kill so many people just like that. And there is a lot of evidence shows that he was getting the records. He knew the numbers. He knew it was failing, but still he didn't accept his responsibility. He didn't change. He kept on blaming others. That was what Hitler did and Mussolini did. Greatness is accepting your mistakes and trying to change. Lenin also was wrong, but we don't know what Lenin would have done had he lived long enough. Because in the end, he changed the economic system. When he was dying, it was a changed economy. So Lenin, who knows, might have understood that his application was wrong. We don't know. But Stalin was not like that, and Mao was not like that. So there is no reason to forgive them.
Sir, comparing to the USSR and China, both went for industrialization,
Both went for industrialization.
massive industrialization, whereas China was more successful. Both
No.
followed same principles.
Till this point, we covered a disaster that was China. But after this, China would change. We'll discuss it in some other context. I mean, when we're doing modern China, much later, recent China. But till this point, it was a disaster. Till 1976. So China's success took place despite Mao and after, from 70s. We'll discuss that later. But till this point, it was a disaster. Human disaster. Economic disaster.
For Lenin, conditions favored, whereas for Mao, it's all about the humiliation faced by the people of China.
Exactly. Humiliation is a part of it, but still there is an ideology for the workers, for the peasants, all that. But then where is ideology being followed? It is they were talking about the poor people, but in the end, everybody is affected. Workers were deprived of the rights. They were forced to work under low wage conditions. Working conditions were poor. And peasants were, anyway, most of violence took place because of agricultural reforms. And collectivization was responsible for most of violence, both in Russia and in China. And how can collectivization be communism? How can you take land from everybody and give it to the party? Okay. And then many years have passed after what Lenin said or what Stalin did. Mao had enough time to rework what was going, and he could have changed. If he was sensitive enough, he would have changed, but he was not. He was sure his ideology was right, and he wanted to be a great figure in that line of ideology, rather than examining whether the ideology was right. Isn't it?
Yes, sir.